Hi everybody, my name is Eric Ostrander. Today I'm going to be tying a Sekasa Kebari Tenkara fly with a stonefly pattern. For a hook, I use a TMC 2312 size 10 fly. I've already got it loaded up. For thread, I use a 6/0 rust brown. I also use a 6/0 in iron gray. I've already got this loaded up. And then finally, I have some ultra wire in small, and it's just kind of this copper color. For hackle, I use a Coq de Lion feather I really like, and I just use kind of some brown dubbing. So as you can see, I've already got the thread loaded up onto the fly. I start off with a head like this just to kind of give it a hot spot, and I'm going to just finish this up with a whip finish. And I usually don't use adhesive on these, so I'm going to do a couple of whip finishes to make sure that it doesn't come apart. So I'm going to put that thread to the side, and then I'm going to tie on my iron gray just right behind the head. Give it a little bit there, cut off the excess. Next thing, I'm going to tie in my wire. Give it a good few wraps right around the front here, and then I'm going to progress the thread to the back. What I usually do with the wires, I bring it back and I rest it on the spool so that it's kind of out of the way. Once I've gone back about to the barb, maybe a little bit further behind that, I'll get my goose biots and tie those in. I use just a brown goose biot, and the goose biot tail tips stick out just about as long as the barbed part of the hook points forward. Tie 2 on there for the stonefly tail. I'm going to wrap up these biots a little bit. I usually keep them on there pretty far up the ways just to add a little bit extra body. We're going to go over all this with dubbing in just a second, so it really doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be very pretty right here. So I'm going to take my thread back to the beginning. I've got the goose biots tied in. Now I'm going to get my dubbing, and you want a lot of dubbing for this. The body's pretty big, and really the dubbing is all the body, so you've got to put a lot in. Also make sure that dubbing is on there pretty tight. When we go over this in a second with wire, you'll see why we want this dubbing to be pretty tight. And this is the most time-consuming part of this fly, is just making sure that the dubbing is tight. And we want to make it be pretty darn thick. And I just use my saliva to spin it over the thread. A lot of people use wax, but I find that I have more saliva than I do wax. And we're getting almost up to that hot spot up at the front. I'm going to go ahead and do a few final wraps here. Now that I've got a nice tight body, I'm going to wrap my wire up. Now, I typically wrap my wire in the opposite direction that I do the thread. That just comes from habit from other flies trying to reinforce the body. As you can see how, since we did the dubbing nice and tight, the wire is going right on top of the dubbing, not going down deep into the dubbing. We actually want to make sure that we see the rib on there. So fish see it and it looks a little bit more like a natural. So now that I've got that there, tie this wire off, clip it off. And now it's time to tie in the coq de lion feather. So I do it with the barb pointing forward. Tie it on. Doesn't really matter if the barb is still there, because in the end it's all going to get covered up. But just to be perfect, I will clip it off. And now I'll put my hackle pliers on there. And this feather is a little bit fragile, so you really have to clamp down with the hackle pliers. I'm going to go around 1, 2, 3, and kind of a 3.5. Tie the edge down. It doesn't really matter if I'm pinching fibers in here, because I'm all going to push them forward anyways in a second. So let's get my fingers a little wet, pull that all forward, go over it just a little bit so it kind of points forward. Oh, that's a little bit too much. And that's a pretty good right there. And I'm going to finish up with a whip finish there. And I usually don't like to use glue on these, so I'm going to do 2 whip finishes. And there we go. The Stonefly Sekasa Kebari.